I watched through the one-way glass as they snapped the handcuffs around my husband's wrists. Leo Vance, the man I had loved for 8 years, the father of my children, looked smaller somehow as the FBI agents read him his rights. Next to him, my sister Stella sat with her head in her hands, mascara running down her perfect cheeks. And in the adjoining room, Alistair Vance, the patriarch who had orchestrated it all, was being led away in chains. 6 months ago, I was the one in handcuffs accused of corporate espionage. 6 months ago, I had lost everything. But today, I was the one standing on the other side of that glass, and justice was finally being served. Before I continue with what happened next, if you're enjoying this story of betrayal, survival, and ultimate revenge, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. Your support means everything and helps me share these stories with more people who need to hear them. Now let me take you back to where it all began, because you need to understand just how far I fell before I could rise again. 12 months earlier, I stood on a stage at the Portland Convention Center holding a crystal trophy that caught the light and sent rainbows dancing across my burgundy gown. The placard read Designer of the Year, and as I looked out at the sea of faces applauding me, I felt like I had finally made it. The annual Vance Construction Gala was the event of the season, and here I was being celebrated in front of everyone who mattered in the industry. My husband Leo beamed at me from the front table, our children. Noah and Lily waved their little hands, and even my father-in-law, Alistair Vance, gave me one of his rare approving nods. My younger sister Stella sat beside Leo, clapping along with everyone else, her smile bright and warm. I thought I had everything. I had no idea I was about to lose it all in the most spectacular and devastating way possible. The applause died down and I returned to my seat, still clutching my award, my heart full. I had worked 10 years to get here, starting as a junior draftsperson right out of architecture school and clawing my way up through pure talent and relentless dedication. The Phoenix Project, my baby, my masterpiece, was set to break ground in 3 months. It was a mixed-use development that would revitalize an entire neighborhood, combining affordable housing with commercial spaces in a way that was both beautiful and functional. I had poured my soul into every line of those blueprints. After dinner, Alistair took the stage again. He was a commanding figure even at 67, with silver hair slicked back and a smile that never quite reached his cold blue eyes. He began talking about the future of Vance construction, about innovation and fresh perspectives. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Ladies and gentlemen, the Phoenix Project represents the future of this company, and I believe it deserves leadership that matches its ambition. That's why I'm pleased to announce that my son Leo, along with our talented new creative director, will be spearheading this initiative going forward. The spotlight swung away from my table and landed on the stage as Leo stood up, straightening his tie. But he didn't walk up alone. He reached down and took Stella's hand, guiding her to stand with him. My little sister, who had joined the company just 2 years ago as a junior designer who I had mentored and protected and championed. She was wearing a dress I had never seen before, designer expensive, and she moved with a confidence that seemed foreign on her. They walked to the stage together, hand in hand, and the wrongness of it hit me like a freight train. When they reached Alistair, Leo took the microphone. Sometimes to reach new heights, we have to let go of what's outdated and lacking in ambition. His eyes found mine across the room, held my gaze with something cruel and triumphant. The Phoenix Project needs vision, not just technical skill. It needs someone who understands that in this business, sentiment has no place. Stella gets that. She's hungry in a way that, frankly, some of our more established designers have forgotten how to be. The applause started again, but it sounded hollow in my ears like waves crashing in a seashell. Stella stepped forward to accept a leather portfolio from Alistair, the portfolio I had been assembling for months, and she smiled into the lights. It was not the shy smile of my little sister. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment, who had planned for it. I sat frozen in my seat while people around me clapped. A few colleagues shot me sympathetic glances, but most were already focusing on the new golden duo on stage. My children were confused. Noah, 7 years old and perceptive beyond his years, tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, why is Aunt Stella getting your project?" I didn't have an answer. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat. The world was tilting, and I didn't understand why. The gala continued, but I moved through it like a ghost. Every time I tried to approach Leo, he was surrounded by board members congratulating him. Stella avoided my eyes, entirely staying close to Alistair, like she was his protege, not my sister. By the time we got home that night, near midnight, I was vibrating with a mixture of hurt and rage. I put the kids to bed, kissing their foreheads and promising that everything was fine, then came back downstairs to confront Leo. He was pouring himself a drink completely calm like nothing had happened. I wouldn't understand I created the Phoenix Project. Every single design element, every structural innovation, every sustainable feature, that was me. And you just handed it to my sister in front of 500 people without even telling me. He finally turned, and the look on his face was one I had never seen before. It was contempt, pure and undiluted. You know what your problem is. You think small. You think about buildings and blueprints and winning awards for your precious designs. You don't think about power. You don't think about expansion. Stella gets it. She understands what it takes to play at the level my family operates at. She's 26 years old, Leo. She's barely out of school. What does she know about managing a project of this scale? She knows how to make the right people happy. She knows how to smile and nod and not question every goddamn decision the board makes. His voice was rising now, the careful veneer cracking. You want to know the truth, Ava. You've become a liability, always pushing for your ethical standards, your sustainable materials, your affordable housing quotas. That's not how empires are built. I felt like I was talking to a stranger. 8 years of marriage, 2 children, countless nights spent dreaming together about the future, and this man standing in front of me was someone I didn't recognize. Is this really about the project, or is this about something else? He laughed bitter and sharp. God, you're naive. Stella and we've been working together for over a year. She understands me in ways you never could. She's ambitious. She's hungry. She's not content to spend her life drawing pretty pictures and pretending she's changing the world. The words hit me like physical blows. My sister, my husband, over a year. While I was working 16-hour days to finish the Phoenix designs, they had been plotting behind my back. I thought of all the times Stella had come to me for advice, all the late nights Leo claimed to be at the office, all the family dinners where they sat across from each other and smiled like everything was normal. I left that night and slept in the guest room. I didn't sleep at all, actually. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together when everything had gone wrong, searching for signs I should have seen. By the time dawn broke, I was numb. The next morning, I got dressed in my best suit and drove to the Vance Construction headquarters. I had my badge, my keycard, my 8 years of access to the building where I had spent most of my adult life. But when I tried to swipe into the parking garage, the light flashed red. Denied. I parked on the street and walked to the main entrance. The security guard Marcus, who I had chatted with almost every morning for years, looked uncomfortable when he saw me approach. "Mrs. Vance, I'm sorry, but you're not on the access list anymore. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "What? There must be some mistake. I work here. I'm the lead architect on the Phoenix project." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Ma'am, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. You need to leave the premises immediately or I'll have to call the police." That was when I saw them through the glass doors. Leo and Stella walking through the lobby together, her hand on his arm, both of them laughing at something. They saw me and stopped. For just a moment, Stella looked guilty, but Leo just smiled cold and victorious and steered her toward the elevators. I called my lawyer from my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. That afternoon, I received an email from HR. I was being placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation into allegations of corporate espionage. Someone had reported that I had been sharing confidential design documents with a competitor, Beaumont and Associates. The email was formal and brief, but the implications were devastating. If the allegations were proven, I could face criminal charges. I knew it was a lie. I had never shared company secrets with anyone, but when my lawyer reviewed the evidence the company provided, he went pale. There were emails from my account to an executive at Beaumont. There were phone records. There were bank transfers to an offshore account in my name. It was all fabricated, all fake, but it had been done with such meticulous care that proving my innocence would be nearly impossible. "The evidence is very compelling," my lawyer said, shuffling papers on his desk. "We're going to need to hire a forensic IT expert, and even then this looks bad, Ava. Very bad." 2 weeks later, Leo filed for divorce. The petition cited irreconcilable differences and requested full custody of Noah and Lily based on my alleged criminal activities and unstable mental state. My own children were being used as weapons against me. The court hearing was a nightmare. Leo's lawyers, the best money could buy from a firm that Alistair Vance had on permanent retainer, painted me as a deranged woman who had committed corporate espionage and could not be trusted around her own children. They brought in psychologists who had never met me but were willing to testify about my supposed mental instability. They showed the judge those falsified emails, those fake bank statements, and made it sound like I was a criminal mastermind. My public defender overworked and underpaid did his best, but we were drowning in quicksand. When Alistair Vance himself took the stand as a character witness, dressed in an impeccable suit and radiating grandfatherly concern, I knew I had lost. Your Honor, he said, his voice heavy, with what sounded like genuine sadness. I have known Ava Monroe for nearly a decade. I welcomed her into our family, into our company, because I believed in her talent. But over the past year, I've watched her become increasingly erratic, increasingly difficult to work with. When confronted about discrepancies in project budgets, she became defensive and hostile. I hate to say this, but the evidence speaks for itself. My grandchildren deserve stability, and I fear Ava cannot provide that at this time. It was a masterclass in manipulation. He played the part of the disappointed but concerned father-in-law perfectly. The judge, a stern woman in her 50s, looked at me with something that might have been pity but felt like disgust. The ruling came down like a guillotine. Temporary full custody to Leo pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Supervised visitation for me twice a month, 2 hours at a time. The house, our beautiful house that I had designed, went to Leo as the primary custodial parent. My bank accounts were frozen as part of the investigation. I was allowed to take my personal belongings and nothing else. As I was leaving the courthouse, Alistair caught up with me in the parking lot. His bodyguard stood a few feet away, but Alistair came close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. Listen carefully, dear, he said, his voice low and cold. This battle was over before it started. You never stood a chance against my family. Now you're going to walk away quietly and stay away from my son and my grandchildren. Because if you keep fighting, if you try to cause problems, accidents can happen. Especially to people who don't know when to quit. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The threat was unmistakable. I understood that I was dealing with someone who would do anything to protect his empire, someone who had probably done terrible things before and would not hesitate to do them again. But I was too broken in that moment to do anything but nod and walk away. I ended up in a warehouse in southeast Portland in a neighborhood where syringes littered the sidewalks and screams echoed through the night. The warehouse had been converted into cheap micro-units, barely more than prison cells. My unit was 150 square feet with a hot plate, a sink, a futon, and a shared bathroom down the hall. This was my life now. No job, no family, no future. I worked whatever jobs I could find that would pay under the table. I washed dishes at a Thai restaurant. I cleaned office buildings at night. I sorted recyclables at a processing plant. Every penny went toward staying alive and saving for a lawyer who might be able to help me see my children again. But I was being watched. There was a black SUV with tinted windows that showed up outside the warehouse at odd hours. Sometimes I would come home from work and find that someone had been in my room, things moved just slightly, my few possessions rifled through. They were making sure I stayed broken, stayed scared, stayed in my place. Then one night I came back from a late shift at the restaurant to find my door forced open. Someone had torn through my room, dumping out my backpack, overturning my futon mattress, searching for something. My heart hammered as I realized they might still be inside. I grabbed a piece of rebar from the hallway and crept in, but the room was empty. They had left in a hurry, or they had found what they were looking for. I couldn't stay there anymore. It wasn't safe, but I had nowhere else to go and no money for first and last month's rent anywhere better. That night, I slept in a 24-hour diner, nursing a coffee and trying not to cry in front of the tired waitress who kept refilling my cup with a sympathetic look. The next day, defeated and desperate, I went to my mother's house. My mother, who had always loved Stella more, who had always made it clear that I was too serious, too ambitious, too much like my father. She lived in a cramped apartment in Gresham, her walls covered with photos of Stella's achievements and almost none of me. She let me in, but she didn't offer comfort. "Why are you here, Ava?" "I need help, Mom. I need a place to stay just for a few days until I can figure things out." She crossed her arms, her face hard. "I heard about what you did. Stella told me everything. How you tried to steal her work, how you got caught selling company secrets. You brought this on yourself." "That's not true. Mom, please, you have to believe me. They set me up. Leo and Stella, they've been working together to destroy me." She actually laughed. "You always were paranoid. Stella is doing wonderfully at that company. She's dating Leo now, did you know? They make a much better couple than you two ever did. She's not too proud to appreciate what she has." The words were like knives. My own mother had chosen Stella's version of events without even asking for mine. She believed I was a criminal, a failure, someone to be ashamed of. I left without another word and never went back. I was cleaning out the storage unit I had rented with the last of my money, sorting through boxes of things from my old life when I found it. A military green duffel bag shoved in the back corner behind Christmas decorations and old photo albums. On the side, stamped in faded black letters, was my Uncle Mac's name, and below it in his handwriting, for Ava. Uncle Mac had been my father's younger brother, a former Marine turned private investigator. He had died 5 years ago, supposedly from a heart attack while hiking alone in the Cascades. The funeral had been closed casket. I remembered how devastated I had been, how he had been one of the few people who really understood me, who encouraged my dreams of becoming an architect. He used to take me to construction sites when I was a kid, teaching me to see the bones of a building, the logic of a structure. I unzipped the duffel with shaking hands. Inside was $15,000 in cash, wrapped in neat bundles, a burner phone, old but charged, and a letter sealed in a plastic bag to protect it from moisture. The envelope had my name on it in Mac's distinctive scrawl. I sat down right there on the concrete floor of the storage unit and opened it. Ava, if you're reading this, the worst has happened. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to protect you. Your father didn't die in an accident at the mill, and neither did I, if that's how they're telling it. They killed him because he wouldn't sell them the mineral rights to his land that's worth hundreds of millions in rare earth elements. Alistair Vance orchestrated it. I've been collecting evidence for years, but I got too close and they found out. By the time you read this, they'll have come for you too, because you're his daughter and you threaten their control. Don't trust the police. Half of them are on Alistair's payroll. You need to find Jax Riley. Tell him the Grey Wolf has come home. He'll know what to do. The address is on the back of this letter. Be careful, kiddo. You're stronger than you know. Make them pay. The letter ended with an address in Montana near the Idaho border. A place called Whitefish. I sat there for a long time holding that letter, my whole understanding of my life shifting and realigning. My father had been murdered. My uncle had been murdered. And I had married into the family responsible for it all, given them my trust and my love and my children. The rage that had been simmering inside me for months suddenly crystallized into something cold and hard and focused. I packed the duffel, added a few essential items, and walked out of that storage unit with purpose for the first time in weeks. I had been running, hiding, surviving, but now I was going to fight. Finding Jax Riley's office took 3 days of driving in a beat-up Honda Civic I bought with some of the cash. Montana was a long way from Portland, and I spent 2 nights sleeping in rest stops, eating gas station sandwiches, watching the landscape change from green to brown to mountainous. Whitefish was a small town nestled in the Rockies, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed immediately. Jax Riley Private Investigations was located above a hardware store on Main Street. The windows were dusty and the paint on the door was peeling. I climbed the narrow stairs and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder, and finally heard movement inside. We're closed. I need to speak with Jax Riley. It's important. The door opened a crack and a man peered out. He was in his 50s with graying hair, pulled back in a ponytail, a beard that needed trimming, and the kind of weathered face that spoke of too many years seeing the worst of humanity. His eyes were sharp, though, assessing me in one quick glance. I don't take walk-ins. Make an appointment. I don't have time for appointments. I held up the letter. Matt Corbin sent me. He said to tell you the Grey Wolf has come home. The change in Jax was immediate and startling. He went pale, then yanked the door open, fully grabbed my arm and pulled me inside before slamming the door and locking it. His office was cluttered with filing cabinets, an ancient computer, and walls covered in maps and photographs. He took the letter from my hands and read it quickly, his jaw tightening. Jesus Christ. Mac, how long has he been dead? 5 years. And you're just finding this now. I explained my situation in quick clip sentences. The betrayal, the frame-up, losing my children, the threats. With every word, Jax's expression grew darker. When I finished, he walked to his desk and pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured generous amounts in both and slid one across to me. Your uncle was the best man I ever knew. We served together in the Marines, then later he helped me on a case that nearly got us both killed. He called me about 2 months before he died, said he was onto something big, something that went all the way to the top. He wanted backup, but I was in the middle of a custody case in Seattle and couldn't get away. By the time I made it to Oregon, he was dead and the investigation was closed. Heart attack, they said. I never believed it. Neither did I. Jax sat down heavily. If what Mac wrote is true and I have no reason to doubt him, then you're in serious danger. Alistair Vance is not just a businessman. He's connected to some very bad people. Politicians, judges, cops, even some federal agents. Going after him is suicide. then I guess I'm suicidal because I'm not stopping until I get my life back and those bastards pay for what they did to my father and my uncle and me. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but we do this smart. Mac mentioned he had evidence stashed somewhere safe. Did he tell you where? The letter said, the truth is at the end of the trail. I think he meant a literal trail somewhere he used to take me when I was a kid. Before I could say more, the window shattered inward in an explosion of glass. Jax threw himself at me, knocking us both to the floor as bullets tore through the office, splintering wood and punching holes in the walls. He rolled, came up with a gun from a desk drawer, and returned fire. I pressed myself flat against the floor, my ears ringing, my heart trying to punch through my ribcage. Back door now, Jax shouted, firing 3 more shots toward the window. We scrambled through the office into a back room filled with old case files and out a door that led to a fire escape. Below, an alley, and beyond that, cars and people and blessed cover. We clattered down the metal stairs. Behind us, I heard boots on the floor of the office, someone coming through the front door. Jax reached the ground first and pulled me the last few feet, then we were running. His truck was parked 2 blocks away, an ancient Chevy that looked like it had seen better decades. We threw ourselves inside, and Jax peeled out tires, screaming. I looked in the side mirror and saw a man emerge from the alley, tall and lean, dressed all in black. He raised a hand holding a gun and fired twice. The back window starred but didn't shatter. Who the hell was that? Probably Silas. He's a freelance killer, works for whoever pays the most. If Alistair sent him, then Mac's evidence is even more damaging than I thought. We drove for hours, taking random turns, doubling back, using every evasion technique Jax knew. Finally, when we were sure we weren't being followed, we stopped at a motel outside of Missoula. Jax paid cash, and we holed up in a room that smelled like old cigarettes and regret. That night, I told him everything I remembered about my childhood trips with Mac and my father. There had been a cabin deep in the mountains near the Oregon-Idaho border in the Wallowa-Whitman National Forest. My father had bought the land decades ago before he started the lumber mill that would later become part of Vance Construction. It was remote, accessible only by logging roads that were barely maintained. Mac used to take me there after my father died, teaching me to fish and track and survive in the wilderness. That has to be where he hid the evidence, I said. It's the only place that makes sense. The end of the trail. Then that's where we're going. But Ava, you need to understand something. If we go after this evidence, we're not just poking a bear. We're going to war with a man who has unlimited resources and no conscience. He's already killed your father and your uncle. He won't hesitate to kill you or me or anyone else who gets in his way. I looked him in the eye. I've already lost everything that matters except my kids. If I don't fight back, I'll never see them again anyway. I'd rather die trying than live like this. He nodded, something like respect in his eyes. You've got your uncle's spine. All right, we leave at first light. After that, we drove back toward Oregon, taking back roads and staying off the grid as much as possible. The journey took 3 days, and twice we spotted that black SUV behind us, hanging back but always there. Jax used every trick he knew, and eventually we shook them, but the message was clear. They knew we were looking for something, and they were not going to let us find it. The logging road that led to the cabin was overgrown and rutted, barely passable even in Jax's truck. We had to hike the last 2 miles through dense forest using a hand-drawn map from Mac's letter and my childhood memories to navigate. It was autumn now, the air crisp and thin at this elevation, leaves turning gold and red. It would have been beautiful if I wasn't terrified. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a dream or a nightmare. It was larger than I remembered, built of thick logs and stone with a wide porch and shuttered windows. It looked abandoned, but when Jax tried the door, it opened easily, recently oiled hinges swinging silent. Inside the cabin was a shrine to obsession. Every wall was covered with photographs, maps, documents, strings connecting faces and places in a web that covered 30 years. I saw pictures of my father, young and smiling, standing next to a man I recognized as a young Alistair Vance. Pictures of their partnership, the formation of Corbin Vance Timber. And then pictures of arguments of lawyers of my father looking older and sadder. The strings converged on a large map of the property, with red circles marking mineral deposits. Jax whistled low. Your uncle didn't just collect evidence. He built a damn case file. We spent hours going through everything. There were manila folders with bank records showing Alistair systematically buying up shares of the company, forcing my father into a minority position. There were signed affidavits from workers who witnessed arguments between the partners. And tucked away in a false bottom drawer, there was a tape recorder with a stack of cassettes labeled by date. I picked one at random and hit play. My father's voice filled the room, younger than I remembered, but unmistakable. Alistair, I'm not selling you the mineral rights. That land has been in my family for 4 generations. It's not about the money. Then you're a fool, John. That land is worth $200 million, maybe more. You could set your daughter up for life. Instead, you're going to leave her a cabin in the woods and some sentimental nonsense about legacy. It's not about her inheritance. It's about doing the right thing. Those minerals should stay in the ground or be extracted responsibly, not raped from the earth by the highest bidder. You self-righteous son of a bitch. I made you. Without me, you'd still be running a 2-bit lumber operation. Everything you have, you owe to me. I owe you nothing. We built this company together as equals. You don't get to change the terms now just because you got greedy. Then we're done. But you're going to regret this, John. I promise you that. The recording ended with a click. I stood there frozen, listening to my father's voice from beyond the grave. Jax found more tapes and we listened to them in chronological order. They painted a clear picture. Alistair pressuring my father to sell, my father refusing, Alistair making threats, and then the final tape dated 2 weeks before my father's death. My father's voice agitated, talking to someone I couldn't identify. He sabotaged the equipment. I'm sure of it now. The safety inspector is in his pocket. He's trying to force an accident to either kill me or scare me into selling. Mac, if something happens to me, you have to protect Ava. Promise me. Don't let Alistair near her. Then Mac's voice, younger but recognizable. I promise, John. But nothing's going to happen to you. We'll take this evidence to the feds and bury that bastard. You don't understand how deep this goes. He owns people at every level. The only way to stop him is to hit him so hard he can't cover it up. And I don't know if we have enough yet. 2 weeks later, my father died in an equipment malfunction at the mill. The investigation concluded it was an accident, poor maintenance, and operator error. Case closed. Mac had tried to get the case reopened, but without hard evidence of foul play, no one would listen. But that wasn't all we found. In the basement of the cabin, hidden behind a false wall, there was a small room that had been turned into a server room. Mac had built a digital archive carefully backed up and encrypted. Jax was able to access it using passwords he found in Mac's letters. What we saw made my blood run cold. Financial records going back 15 years showing money laundering through shell companies, bribes paid to building inspectors, city councilors, state senators, illegal dumping of toxic materials, violations of labor laws. And most damning of all, correspondence between Alistair and a man named Viktor Sokolov discussing the acquisition of rare earth minerals and the elimination of obstacles. My father was referred to as Obstacle 1. There was more. Video files from surveillance cameras Mac had installed covertly over the years. One of them showed Stella, barely 18 years old, entering Alistair's private office for a meeting that lasted 3 hours. When she emerged, she was crying. Another video 2 years later showed her laughing as Alistair handed her an envelope thick with cash. The timestamps proved that their relationship had started when she was still in college, years before she joined the company. He had groomed her, bought her loyalty, and turned her into his weapon against me. We need to get this to the FBI, Jax said. This is enough to put Alistair away for life and take down half the city government with him. But we didn't get the chance. As Jax was copying files to an external drive, I heard it. The sound of vehicles coming up, the logging road engines straining against the grade. Jax heard it too. He looked at me and mouthed one word: run. We grabbed the drive and as much hard copy evidence as we could carry and headed for the back door. But we were too late. The cabin was surrounded. Through the windows, I could see at least 8 men, all armed, all wearing black tactical gear, and standing in front of them directing operations was Silas. Jax pushed me toward the basement stairs. There's a tunnel, he whispered urgently. Mac showed it to me years ago. It comes out a 1/4 mile from here. Go now. What about you? I'll hold them off. Buy you time. Now move. I wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. I ran down the stairs as the first bullets tore through the front door. Behind me, I heard Jax returning fire, the sharp crack of his pistol against the heavier reports of assault rifles. The tunnel was narrow and dark, just barely tall enough for me to crouch. I clutched the hard drive to my chest and crawled as fast as I could, dirt raining down with every explosion of gunfire above. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, but it was probably only a few minutes before I emerged into the forest, coming up through a camouflaged hatch behind a fallen log. I lay still for a moment, gasping, trying to orient myself. Behind me, the gunfire had stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard men shouting and then a scream that was cut short. I forced myself to move to not think about whether Jax was alive or dead, to focus only on survival. I had the evidence. I had to get it to someone who could use it. I ran through the forest using techniques Mac had taught me, staying off trails, moving through the thickest undergrowth where I would be hardest to track. Behind me, I heard the men spreading out to search dogs barking. I ran for hours until my legs burned and my lungs felt like they were going to burst. Finally, I reached a fire road and followed it downhill away from the cabin. Just before dark, I reached a small town and found a library with public internet. Using a fake email account, I uploaded copies of the most damaging files to a secure cloud service, then sent anonymous tips to the FBI, the state attorney general, and 3 major news organizations. Then I called the one person I thought might still be willing to help me. Agent Sarah Chen had been to my house once years ago, investigating a fraud case at a company that did business with Vance Construction. She had been thorough and fair, and more importantly, she had not been afraid of Alistair's lawyers. I didn't know if she would remember me or believe me, but I had no other options. The call went to voicemail. "This is Special Agent Sarah Chen with the FBI Portland Field Office. Leave a message." "Agent Chen, this is Ava Monroe. I need your help. I have evidence of murder, corruption, and racketeering involving Alistair Vance and multiple public officials. My uncle Matt Corbin was investigating this before he was killed. I'm attaching files to an encrypted email. Please, if you ever cared about justice, look at them. I'm running out of time." I hung up and waited, hiding in the children's section of the library, behind a shelf of picture books, watching the door. An hour passed, then 2. I was starting to think she wouldn't respond when my burner phone rang. "Miss Monroe, where are you right now?" "I'm safe. Did you get the files?" "I got them, and I've been looking at your case." "Ava, if even half of what's in these files is real, this is the biggest corruption case in Oregon history. But I need you to come in." "I can't protect you if I don't know where you are." "I can't trust anyone. Alistair has people everywhere." "I understand why you feel that way, but I'm not on anyone's payroll. I've been with the Bureau for 15 years and my record is clean. I give you my word that if you come in, I will keep you safe and I will make sure this evidence gets in front of a grand jury." There was something in her voice, a sincerity that I desperately wanted to believe in. What choice did I have? I couldn't run forever, and even if I could, that wouldn't help my children. "I'm in Sweet Home, Oregon, at the public library. Stay there. I'm sending agents to pick you up right now. Do not leave the building, do not talk to anyone, and if you see anything suspicious, call me immediately." The agents arrived 40 minutes later, 3 of them showing badges and escorting me to an unmarked car. They took me to a safe house in Salem, a nondescript ranch home in a quiet suburb. Agent Chen met me there, along with 2 attorneys from the U.S. Attorney's Office. For the next week, I told them everything. They verified the evidence, brought in digital forensics experts who confirmed the files had not been tampered with. They matched the voices on the recordings to archived speeches by Alistair and my father. Every piece of evidence checked out, but Agent Chen warned me it would not be easy. "Alistair has connections at the highest levels. He'll fight this with everything he has. We need to be strategic. We need more than just these files. We need someone to testify, someone on the inside willing to flip." "What about Stella? She's in deep with him. Maybe if she knew how much trouble she was in, she would talk." Agent Chen considered this. "It's possible. Your sister is young, and she was groomed by a powerful man. A good defense attorney could argue she was manipulated. If we offer her immunity in exchange for testimony, she might take it. But I had a better idea. I don't want to just put them in prison. I want them to confess. I want the world to see what they did." "What do you have in mind?" "I'll wear a wire. I'll meet with Leo and Stella and get them to admit everything. They think I'm broken and desperate. They'll be overconfident." The attorneys looked skeptical, but Agent Chen was intrigued. "It's risky. If they suspect anything, they could get violent. They already tried to kill me. What's one more risk?" After extensive planning and preparation, the meeting was arranged. I sent Leo a text from a new phone, one that couldn't be traced back to the FBI. I told him I was ready to give up, that I just wanted to see my children one more time before I left the state. I asked for a meeting, just the 3 of us, to work out terms. He agreed surprisingly quickly, probably thinking this was his chance to tie up loose ends. We met at a coffee shop in Northwest Portland, a trendy place with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. I wore the wire taped to my chest under my shirt so thin I could barely feel it. 2 agents were at a nearby table reading newspapers and drinking coffee. 3 more were outside in a van recording everything. Agent Chen was in my ear through a tiny receiver, her voice calm and steady. You're doing great, Ava. Just get them talking. Leo and Stella arrived together, and seeing them walk in holding hands made my stomach turn. They looked prosperous and happy, like they were on a date. Stella wore a designer dress and Leo had a new watch, probably a Rolex. They sat across from me and Leo signaled the barista for 2 cappuccinos like this was just a normal social call. Ava, Leo said with exaggerated concern. You look terrible. Are you sleeping, eating? I'm doing fine, considering my life was destroyed. I kept my voice flat, defeated exactly what they would expect. I just want to know one thing. Why did you do this to me? Stella looked away, but Leo leaned forward, his expression almost pitying. Ava, you have to understand. It was never personal. It was business. You were in the way of something much bigger than one person's feelings. I was your wife, the mother of your children. How is that not personal? You were a means to an end. He said it so casually, like he was discussing the weather. When I married you, I needed someone respectable, someone with talent who could help build the company's reputation. And you did that beautifully. But then you started having opinions pushing for changes that would cost us money. You became a liability. Stella finally spoke up, her voice small. Ava, I'm sorry. I really am. But you have to understand, Alistair offered me opportunities you never would have. He saw my potential. He invested in me. And Leo, he made me feel seen in a way that no one ever had. I forced myself to stay calm. So you've been planning this for how long? A year, 2. Leo smiled, actually smiled. About 18 months. Alistair brought Stella into the fold, first recognized her ambition. Then she and I got close and we realized we made a good team. Someone had to take the fall for the Phoenix Project restructuring. It just made sense for it to be you. And the espionage charges, the fake evidence. That was actually Stella's idea, Leo said, looking at her with something like admiration. She's quite clever with technology. We needed something that would not only get you fired but completely destroy your credibility. Corporate espionage fit the bill perfectly. What about my father? What about Uncle Mac? At that, Leo's smile faded slightly. That was before my time. That was all Alistair. But from what I understand, your father made some poor business decisions and paid the price. Your uncle was foolish enough to investigate, so he had to be dealt with as well. It's unfortunate, but sometimes casualties are necessary for progress. I felt the wire against my skin and knew everything was being recorded. In my ear, Agent Chen whispered, That's enough. We have what we need. But I wasn't done. I looked at Stella, my baby sister, who I had protected and mentored and loved. Do you even care about my children, your niece and nephew? She wouldn't meet my eyes. They're better off without you. They'll have a stable home with Leo and me. You destroyed their mother for a job promotion and a man who was using you. I was not being used, Stella snapped, finally showing some fire. I made choices. I wanted this. I wanted the power, the money, the respect. You were always the perfect daughter, the talented one, the one everyone admired. Well, now it's my turn, and I'm not sorry. The FBI moved in, then agents appearing from the back of the coffee shop and the street outside. Leo and Stella barely had time to register what was happening before they were being read their rights and handcuffed. The other customers scrambled away, some recording the scene on their phones. It would be all over social media within the hour. Leo's face went from shock to rage in seconds. You bitch. You set us up. I stood up, pulling the wire from under my shirt and letting it dangle visible. I learned from the best. You taught me that sometimes you have to do whatever it takes to win. The same day, simultaneous raids hit Alistair's Mansion Vance construction headquarters and the homes of 3 city councilors. By nightfall, 22 people were in custody. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulously documented over decades by my Uncle Mac. The news media went into a frenzy. This was the story of the year, maybe the decade. Corruption at the highest levels, murder for profit, corporate espionage. The trial took 8 months to get to court, but when it did, it was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed every day, journalists sketching the proceedings, legal analysts dissecting every testimony on evening news shows. Stella took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Alistair and Leo in exchange for a reduced sentence. On the stand, she cried and said she had been manipulated, that Alistair had groomed her from a young age, that she didn't understand what she was doing. The jury looked unconvinced, but the prosecutors had what they needed, her testimony locking in the timeline of the conspiracy. Leo was defiant to the end, insisting he had done nothing wrong, that he was a victim of a vindictive ex-wife. But the recordings were damning his own words, condemning him. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and came back with guilty verdicts on 14 counts, including conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder. Alistair's trial was the crown jewel. He sat at the defense table in his expensive suits, barely reacting as witness after witness detailed his crimes. His lawyers were the best money could buy, but they had nothing to work with. The evidence was ironclad. On the day the verdict came in guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, he finally showed emotion. Just for a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw rage and disbelief. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual cold control. At sentencing, the judge gave him life without possibility of parole. Leo got 35 years. Stella got 10 with credit for cooperation. It was over. The aftermath took time to sort through. Vance Construction, now toxic in the public eye, hemorrhaged clients and went into bankruptcy. Assets were seized to pay restitution to victims of Alistair's fraud. The mineral rights to my father's land, which had been stolen through a shell company, were returned to my family. They were worth, as Alistair had said all those years ago, over $200 million. I didn't want blood money, but I wanted justice and security for my children. With the help of ethical financial advisors, I set up trusts for Noah and Lily, ensuring their futures. I used the rest to acquire the remains of Vance Construction at bankruptcy auction, paying pennies on the dollar for a company that had once been worth billions. I renamed it Monroe Corbin Legacy, honoring my father and uncle who had paid the ultimate price for standing up to corruption. My first act as CEO was to implement every ethical standard that Alistair had fought against. Fair wages, sustainable materials, genuine affordable housing, quotas, transparency in all dealings. I hired back workers who had been fired for questioning Alistair's methods. I brought in Jax Riley, who had survived his injuries from the cabin attack, as head of corporate security. Together we built something I could be proud of. The custody battle was resolved quickly once Leo was convicted. I was granted full custody of Noah and Lily with supervised visitation for Leo from prison, though he never once requested it. My children struggled at first, confused and angry about what had happened to their family. But children are resilient, and with therapy and time and a stable home, they began to heal. Noah asked me once why I had fought so hard when everyone said I should give up. I knelt down to his level and looked him in the eyes. Because you and your sister are worth fighting for. Because sometimes the right thing is the hard thing. And because your grandfather and great-uncle taught me that the truth always matters even when it costs you everything. Now, 6 months after the trials ended, I stood in my office on the 20th floor of the Monroe Corbin Legacy building, looking out over Portland. The Phoenix project had been completed not as a vanity development, but as it was always meant to be: affordable, sustainable, beautiful. My children would visit the office after school, doing homework in the conference room, secure in the knowledge that their mother would always be there. My phone rang. It was Jax. "Boss, we've got 3 new clients interested in working with the company. They specifically asked for you. Said they want to do business with someone who can't be bought or intimidated." I smiled. "Set up meetings for next week. Let's see what they have in mind." As I hung up, Lily ran into my office, her backpack bouncing. "Mom, Mrs. Henderson said I can be in the science fair. Can we build a model of sustainable housing?" I hugged her tight. "Absolutely. We'll make it amazing." Looking back, I could trace the moment everything changed. It wasn't when I found the evidence, or when I went to the FBI, or even when I wore that wire. It was earlier, lying on that futon in a warehouse, deciding that I would rather die fighting than live on my knees. In that moment of despair, I found something I didn't know I had. Not just courage, but certainty. Certainty that I deserved better, that my children deserved better, that my father and uncle had not died in vain. The empire Alistair built on lies and blood and stolen dreams had fallen, and from its ashes I built something real, something honest. Something that would last, not because it crushed everyone in its path, but because it lifted people up. My father would have been proud. Mac would have been proud. And finally, I was proud of myself. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between staying silent or fighting back against impossible odds? What did you choose and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if you found inspiration in this journey from victim to victor, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me share more stories of resilience and justice. Until next time, remember that you're stronger than you think, and you deserve a life built on truth, not lies.